All right, so today we are diving into a really powerful memoir called Careless People. It's from a former Facebook executive, Sarah Wynne Williams, and it's a real insider's account. It's all about how a company that literally promised to connect the entire world, well, ended up doing a lot of damage, starting with its own people and their ideals.
And this quote right here from the author, it just sums up the whole thing perfectly. It started as a hopeful comedy and ended in darkness and regret. I mean, that really sets the stage, doesn't it? It's a story that goes from this wide-eyed idealism, we're going to change the world for the better, to this absolutely crushing realization of the harm that was caused. So let's start where she does, with the hopeful comedy.
Okay, so let's set the scene. Before she ever set foot in Silicon Valley, Sarah Wynne Williams was actually a diplomat for New Zealand. And she had this big idea. She genuinely believed that Facebook could be this incredible force for good in the world, like a totally new form of diplomacy. And she was absolutely determined to make that happen. So get this. In late 2010, she comes up with this idea for a job that doesn't even exist yet, a Facebook diplomat. Her whole pitch was about engaging with governments all over the world. I mean, think about the guts that takes, right? To just invent a job title and pitch it. And she actually lands a meeting with Facebook's head of policy, a woman named Marnie Levine. The only problem? Levine's world pretty much began and ended in Washington, D.C.
And Levine's reaction was, well, it was brutal. She basically said, let me tell you, a New Zealand Facebook diplomat is not something I need. Just totally shot her down. For Levine, the world outside the U.S. just didn't matter. Facebook was an American company, it was regulated by Americans, and that was that. It looked like Sarah's dream was dead on arrival. But then, a real-world crisis happened, and it would prove her point in the most personal and frankly terrifying way. Yeah, in 2011, a massive earthquake hits her hometown of Christchurch. All the phone lines are down, everything is chaos, the only way to communicate, Facebook. It literally became a lifeline. I mean, her own sister was trapped, and Facebook was how they knew she was okay. This was the proof. This was undeniable. After that, Facebook pretty reluctantly hired her for that job she invented. Her new boss even admitted, I'm still not even sure this is a job. But she was in. So she gets the job, she's in. But once she's on the inside, her idealistic vision just slams head-on into the really strange and insulated culture of Facebook's leadership. And that hopeful comedy she'd imagined, it starts to fall apart fast. In this quote about Mark Zuckerberg, it just tells you everything you need to know about his mindset back then. The Prime Minister of New Zealand is visiting Facebook's campus, and Mark's staff asks him to meet the guy. His response, right in front of everyone? No. I already said I definitely didn't want to do that. Just a flat-out refusal. He had absolutely zero interest in politics or world leaders or any of it. His world was just code and product. And that detachment, well, it would have massive, massive consequences down the line.
And then you've got Sheryl Sandberg, the COO. This slide really lays out the jarring disconnect between her public image and what was allegedly happening behind the scenes. So on one hand, you have the public persona, the author of Lean In, this huge champion for women. But on the other hand, the book describes a private reality where she would demand female staff do office housework and would advise hiring service-oriented Filipina nannies while refusing to even discuss the paid help that made her own work-life balance possible. A real disconnect. So Wynne Williams comes up with a term for this whole attitude, lethal carelessness. And what's really important here is that it wasn't about people being evil or malicious. Not at all. It was this profound, this dangerous indifference. It's about leaders who break things and then just retreat back into their bubble of wealth and power, never having to actually look at or deal with the wreckage they created.
Okay, so this is where things really shift into high gear. Facebook has its big IPO, its initial public offering, but it's shaky. The stock price is falling, so a new mandate comes down from the top. One singular mission that would steamroll everything else in its path. Growth. At all costs. And that mission led to this one huge central question. What would Facebook be willing to trade for access to 1 billion users in China? I mean, this was the ultimate test of the company's values, right? China was the biggest untapped market on the planet. And to get in, well, it seems Mark Zuckerberg was willing to trade away just about everything the company claimed to stand for. According to the memoir, this led to a secret project codenamed Aldrin. And its purpose was shocking: to build custom censorship tools for the Chinese Communist Party.
We're talking about storing all Chinese user data on servers inside China, monitoring private messages, the whole 9 yards. But the most chilling part? An internal document apparently admitted that by doing this, Facebook would be helping the government with data requests that could lead directly to death, torture, and incarceration. Just let that sink in.
And you can see Mark's mindset really changing here. He's adopting what the book calls street fighter tactics. So when regulators in places like India started pushing back or threatening to block Facebook projects, he stopped seeing them as partners to work with. Nope. They were now adversaries. And he wanted to know how they could use the platform itself, the tools, the data, everything, as a weapon to win against these so-called enemies.
So you have this growth at all costs engine, this new street fighter mentality. And now, all of those chickens are about to come home to roost. The consequences of these decisions were about to explode onto the world stage in a way that absolutely no one could ignore anymore. And that explosion, of course, was the 2016 U.S. presidential election. The world wakes up to Donald Trump's surprise victory, and almost immediately, all eyes turn to Facebook. So what was Mark Zuckerberg's public reaction? Total dismissal. He called the idea that fake news on Facebook could have influenced the election a pretty crazy idea. But that was in public. Privately, on a company jet, it was a totally different story. His own team started explaining to him just how masterfully the Trump campaign had used Facebook's own tools, like micro-targeting and even embedded Facebook staff, to win. According to the book, one executive just laid it out there, admitting that the platform had, quote, basically handed the election to Donald Trump. And if you think that's bad, the ultimate price for this lethal carelessness was being paid halfway across the world, in Myanmar. While everyone was obsessing over the US election, Facebook's platform was being used to fuel an actual genocide. And the worst part is, people like the author had been warning leadership about this for years, telling them that the platform was being used to spread just this virulent, horrific hate speech against the Rohingya Muslim minority. But those warnings were ignored. Facebook didn't hire enough people who actually spoke the local languages to moderate content. They didn't fix the tech issues that made it almost impossible to do so. And the result? A United Nations report found that Facebook played a critical role in spreading the hate speech that led to atrocities. Atrocities where, and this is a quote, children were killed in front of their parents. It's just devastating. So let's go back to that private jet for a second. Mark is processing this new reality, that his platform essentially made a president. But his takeaway wasn't horror. It wasn't, oh my God, what have we done? No. A much different, much darker idea started to form. He thought, if Facebook is powerful enough to make a president, maybe I could be president. And so he starts planning this presidential-style tour across America, and even thinking about how he could take over the news media. And this is really the climax of the book. As Mark is laying out these grand ambitions, Sarah tries to warn him. She compares him to William Randolph Hearst, the power-mad media tycoon who inspired the movie Citizen Kane. And Mark's response to this cautionary tale? A simple, chilling question. Is that a bad thing? Just think about that. He saw no problem with it. No moral red line, no danger whatsoever. And for Sarah, that was it. That was the moment. The final crushing realization that her entire mission, this job she invented to try and guide Facebook's founder towards some kind of global responsibility, it hadn't just failed. It had backfired. Spectacularly. Putting him on the world stage didn't teach him responsibility. It did the opposite. It made him, in her words, give less of a damn. And so this whole story, this insider's account from Sarah Wynne Williams, it really leaves us with a huge question, one that's more relevant than ever. When a company's mission is just to connect the world, no matter what, who's actually responsible when that connection turns toxic, when it fuels division, hate, and even violence? That's the question the book leaves us with. And frankly, it's a question we're all still trying to answer today.